Research focuses on exploring discriminatory and oppressive laws and the structural and state violence experienced by people labeled with a psychiatric diagnosis, psychiatric consumers, survivors, ex-patients, and mad folk. So let's give Tracy a big round of applause.
Hi everybody. So I'm going to start off telling you about an event because I have a platform and I'm going to use it. We would like to invite everybody to join us for the Patient-Built Wall Tour that will be occurring on October 24th, which will be led by the Mad historian, Mr. Jeffrey Rio. The purpose of the wall tour is to remember the men and women asylum patients who built, lived, worked, and died behind the last remaining structures that still exist on the grounds of the former provincial lunatic asylum, otherwise known as CAMH. The walls were originally constructed in 1860 by unpaid patient laborers. Some of these walls have been torn down. Some of them have been reconstructed and remain to this day. Currently, there's, again, a proposal to demolish part of the wall. Survivor groups are in conversation with CAMH regarding this issue. I invite you to meet us at Queen Street West at Shaw Street on October 24th at 1 p.m. to learn about the unpaid labor of psychiatric patients, otherwise known as moral therapy. And to quote Jeffrey Rio, to experience how barriers of exclusion and exploitation thus become bricks of inclusion by liberating a history of patients' lives that only these walls can continue to tell long after all of us are dead. And now for my speech. Am I going too fast? Disability affects infants to the elderly, man to trans to woman, queer to straight, black to white, rich to homeless. However, the social construction of differences has an untapped power. But we're all too busy replicating what the larger society has done to us to unleash that power. Within our disability communities, we fight, judge, discriminate, oppress, and marginalize people who are in other disability categories. We have disability groups at the margin of disability studies, such as mad folks, people with addictions, and people with intellectual disabilities. There are other disability communities where the notion of blame and responsibility are so intertwined with their disability that they are cast aside. An example of this is people who acquire hepatitis C from drug use. Yet, funny enough, the notion of blame and responsibility is never really questioned nor attributed to an individual that acquires a physical disability due to engaging in a high-risk activity, like drag racing. I suppose it's easier to blame the person than analyzing the social, political, and economic aspects that are involved. I've started having hesitations about identity politics. It separates us. We dispute definitions and ideas. Everyone is kept busy defining themselves in light of others. Meanwhile, those with the most power in society continue to marginalize, discriminate, and oppress the disability community as a whole, and explicitly and in public sight those at the bottom of the hierarchy. In the Western world, we have been witnessing the government's disregard of lethal abuses and rights violations, in particular in regards to racialized mad people, a large majority being from the Black and Indigenous communities. Individuals in these communities are perceived by police officers as dangerous and deviant for who they are rather than what they have done, leading to many innocent people being killed. A link exists between police behavior and judicial acceptance of that conduct. Police engage in sanist and racist profiling because the agencies overseeing their actions, as well as the courts, allow it. In Toronto, none of the officers responsible for the deaths of racialized mad individuals have been held accountable for their actions. This sends a clear message to the larger society that the lives of people who experience mental distress are of little or no importance. Additionally, most coroner's inquests, recommendations arising in the aftermath of these killings have gone unimplemented and reflects this devaluation. It has become evident that the rights of psychiatric consumer survivors, mad folks, are perceived to be just as menial and inferior after death as they are while they are alive. The Ontario Coroners Act is a deeply disturbing reflection of this. The Ontario Coroners Act is inundated with expansive loopholes that allows the Office of the Chief Coroner ample leeway to disregard holding mandatory public inquests in regards to the deaths of mad people held in police custody, psychiatric hospitals, and correctional facilities. Through an expansive interpretation of the Coroners Act, the real number of deaths occurring while in custodial care are obscured. The lethal abuses and right violations occurring within the system are neither oversights nor technicalities. They are a result of the standard procedures and applications. These standards have been set, deeming who is worthy of an inquest, who is worthy of having a public servant and/or institution that is responsible for their death held accountable, and who is not. The restrictive conditions required for a mandatory inquest have established a differential treatment of justice for psychiatric consumer survivors. Power and authority breeds corruption. It disempowers the community and the nation by making people distrustful of others, by making people think that their neighbor is a crazy person who they must be protected from, by persuading the people to accept, even to demand, increased police power of the state to protect them from EDPs, otherwise known as emotionally disturbed person. But I think there's been a mistake. I think EDP stands for everyday people. The effects of the intersecting oppression of people based on their ethnicity and/or racialization and who have a psychiatric diagnosis reveals a long historical pattern of intersecting sanist and racist discrimination that currently continues today. The stigma associated with racialized mad folks comes out in hushed tone, an averted gaze, or in outright discrimination. But it is the silence that displays the acceptance of what is occurring to this population the most. As a society, we do a really poor job of talking about, never mind understanding, intersectional oppressions, particularly the intersectional oppressions of racism and disability. The faces we see in the disability rights movement are primarily white, but this movement has not been without the contributions of people of color. Unfortunately, their accomplishments are often overshadowed by white people. As white disability activists, we must continue to increase the visibility of people of color in this movement, as there would be no movement without them. And in regards to mad people of color in particular, I just hope that enough people will start taking a critical look at what is happening and make a stand. But it starts here. It starts in this community, standing up for each other rather than creating divisiveness. I can't ever say that word. Divisiveness. So today, I am marching not for, but in solidarity with the mad racialized communities, and I hope you all will join me on that.